Okay, in this video we're going to be talking about creating a recursive formula. So let's go ahead and get started. What is a recursive formula? It's basically a formula that states how to create a number series based off of a previous number. Now, um, what I mean by that is we are going to use the previous number of our sequence in order to get to our next number. And of course, I'm going to show y'all as we go through this video. So it may seem a little confusing at this point, but the one thing I want to pay attention to is this right here, the Sn minus 1. This is what is going to represent the previous number. Okay, so sometimes the previous number, don't get necessarily hung up on the S. Sometimes it could be Tn minus 1. And I'm going to put this in parentheses, and whenever you see this setup, this always represents the previous number. Okay, now we're going to go ahead and dive into some example problems to kind of help out. So let's go ahead and get started. Okay, in this next screen, what we are doing, we are giving a couple examples, and we're going to try to find the recursive formula. So let's start with this very first one. We have 35, 32, 29, 26. What exactly are we doing? Like, let's just focus in on 35 for a second. What exactly are we doing to 35 to get to 32? Well, we are subtracting 3. Well, are we doing that to the same to get this? Yes, subtract 3. And yes, okay, good. So we are constantly subtracting 3. Okay, so the recursive formula would be, what we're doing is, I'm just going to put this in words, we are subtracting 3 from previous number. Okay, that's basically the statement that we just observed here. We are subtracting 3 from the previous number. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to write that as a formula. Okay, so I'm going to say, and I'm going to say in this case t of n. I'm just going to use variable t. T of n is equal to, meaning in order to get to my next number, I have to take the previous number. Now remember the previous number, Tn minus 1, and I'm just going to subtract 3, and that's it. So by making this statement, it means that we are taking the previous number, which is Tn minus 1, and just subtracting 3 to it to get to the next number. Pretty simple. All right, let's try this next problem. We have negative 34, we have negative 64, negative, okay, so it looks like we are subtracting 30 every single time. So once again, we're going to take our Tn, and we are going to write out our previous number, which is Tn minus 1, because remember, that's how we write our previous number, and we're just subtracting 30 from it. We're subtracting 30 from the previous number to get to our next number, and that's how easy it is. Well, let's look at this next question. Negative 1 to 6 to negative 36 or to positive 216. Well, hopefully you guys have picked up on this, but you are multiplying by negative 6 every single time. All right, so let me clear that out a little bit. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to write a statement that's saying that we're taking the previous number and multiplying it by negative 6. So, all right, T of n, that means basically getting to the next number again, is we are taking the previous number, Tn minus 1, and I'm going to put in parentheses this time just so you know that we're multiplying by negative 6. Now, of course, that's one way you could write it. You can make it probably another more familiar way is take negative 6 and put Tn minus 1. So you're basically saying I'm taking the previous number, multiplying it by negative 6. All right, the next one here, negative 2, negative 4, negative 6. Okay, I think we are multiplying by positive 2. So same as last, we're taking the previous number, we're taking Tn minus 1, and then we're multiplying it by 2. Now, if you want to write it probably a more familiar way, you can write Tn minus 2, or Tn, and that is 2 times Tn minus 1. And there's our answer. All right, let's take a look at these bottom ones here. Now, these bottom ones, we are given what will be known as a closed form formula, where a closed form means you can just kind of plug in whatever n you're referring to. Like, let's say if I wanted to figure out my fifth term, that means I would plug in a 5 in for n and get my answer. Okay, but we're trying to make a recursive formula for this. So in order to write a recursive formula, we got to figure out what does our sequence look like. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to just find the first 3 terms of my sequence. So the first 3 terms, hopefully you know by now, remember n is equal to 1, n is equal to 2, n is equal to 3 here. So I'm going to plug in these numbers in here. So I believe my first number would be negative 4, my second number would be positive 3, and then my last number would be, it looks like 10. So based upon my observations of my sequence, I am adding 7. So if I was going to create a recursive formula from that, I know that I'm taking my previous number and adding 7 to it. So t of n is equal to my previous term, tn minus 1, and I'm just adding 7 to it, and I'm done. Let's look at this next one. All right, once again, we're dealing with a closed form formula. And you might be asking, why do I know that it's a closed form formula? And the answer is because it just has n in it. And that's it. If it ever had a formula where it was like a tn minus 1, then I know that's recursive because that's the previous number. But this is a closed form. So I've got to create my sequence, which you don't necessarily have to do this every time, but is better to just see what you're doing and a better observation. Okay, here we go. When I plug in a 1 in from here, that would make a 1. When I plug in a 2 in for here, that would make a 3. When I plug in a 3 in for here, that would make a 9. So basically what I'm doing, I'm observing that I'm multiplying by 3 every single time. So once again, Tn equals my previous number, Tn minus 1 times 3. Now, one thing I noticed is that actually they wrote A of n, so let me rewrite that. And I did that on the previous one too. So I would say A of n is equal to of A n minus 1 times 3. Remember, don't get hung up on the fact that they use A and we happen to use T. Don't get hung up on that. And remember the other way that you can write it, just to make it a little more recognizable, so to speak. You can put 3 on this side and put A n minus 1. And that's it. That's recursive. So if you have any questions, please let me know. Um, Thank you very much for watching.